Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 121, The Neutral Zone.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ken Ray. And we are back. Internet media has gotten too soft. Look what's happened since we've been away. The expansion of shows about people who think they can dance and videos of animals failing at being animals and wearing clothing. Beware, producers of substandard topical discussion programs. We are back.
You are kind of scary, man.
Dude, you gotta take a hard line.
Each week on Mission Log, we take a deep look at every single episode of Star Trek ever from the beginning, and we mine it to its core to find out the morals, meanings, messages, ethics, and philosophies buried within. This week, we're talking about The Neutral Zone. Ken, it's the final episode of Season 1 of The Next Generation.
That is so crazy to me. That is insane.
That we'd never get here.
I can't believe we're already here. Are you kidding me? It's amazing to me that this seems to have gone much faster than the first season of Star Trek, the original series that we did.
Oh, really?
It did to me, yeah. I felt like this just like flew by. Mm-hmm. And of course it made, never mind. I was going to make a season 3 of the original series joke, but I think we all know how painful that was. There's no need to go back into it. So I guess my guess would be coming to the end of season 1, and this is like a pretty full episode as far as like randomness is concerned. Mm-hmm. There must be a ton of trivia here.
Ken, boy, this is a tough task this week working on trivia, because there's a few things happening here that we have to talk about. The most important thing is that there was a writer's strike in effect right up until and during the period that this episode was produced. So there's actually too much to cover in our little segment that we do for trivia. And I have a ton of notes, but I'm going to try to put the major pieces together here for you so we're all on the same page. Now, there are a lot of people who get credit for what turned into this episode. Mona Clay and Deborah McIntyre, they get a writer's credit primarily for that cryonic storyline. This was actually a piece of fan fiction. We talked about the whole blind submission process, Star Trek. So this is a story that got submitted, and it was like, well, okay, we've got this. We can work with it. Now, there are pieces of that.
I'm sorry, let's just stop really quickly right there. So because you hear that it's like a piece of fan fiction, you think, wow, a piece of fan fiction that rose to the top. And it's more like, right. Well, we can't talk to anybody who actually writes. Right. So, and in fairness, they actually did do some writing, and I'm not bashing fan fiction. I'm just saying it's less a triumph. This is not a David Gerald story. It's more a, hey, look what I found story.
Right. Yeah. And we actually don't have any other writing credits for Mona Clay or Deborah McIntyre. Now, it is interesting that there were many elements that got written and excised and changed over time. There's even a little bit of trivia that I can't corroborate about Harry Mudd having been a character who was frozen and then revived in the 24th century. But I out of all of the documents that I have, and I do have a ton of documents, I'm going to share a little bit of that. I can't corroborate that one piece. So I am going to post some things that I think that our audience will find very interesting. Just not that one little detail that I've been looking for.
I got to say, man, in the alternate universe where that is true,
yeah,
this is probably an hour and a half long episode about how much I hate the use of Harry Mudd.
Well, sadly, Roger Carmel died before this episode was made. So even if they had decided to go that way, sadly, we lost him and his talent before this was made. So now, who else do we owe the episode to? Well, Greg Strangis wrote the original story draft, and it was absolutely nothing like what we have here. So I do have a ton of memos in and among the production staff, all complaining separately about the same thing, that the original draft of the episode called The Neutral Zone, written by Greg Strangis, is too short a season. You have an old Starfleet admiral in a wheelchair. And essentially, he's orchestrating this whole thing with the Romulans. And now other big differences, we would have had Wesley in that episode. We would have had Tasha in that episode. And interestingly, there was a bit of backstory about Picard having defeated 2 Romulan ships years ago. But that was tagged as being a little too warlike. We already know about Picard's history with the Ferengi, so that little bit was excised as well. Essentially, that original story called the Neutral Zone, the only thing that exists is that there is a neutral zone. So where does that bring us? Well, Maurice Hurley, who we have talked about many times, he was a producer during this time on Next Gen, he really gets most of the credit for this episode. With that writer strike on and really no time to develop what would become the script to cap off the first season, there were a few things that went unanswered. This would have originally been a 2-parter episode, a cliffhanger to close season 1 and open season 2. And I actually am going to address one of those cliffhanger questions when we get into our discussion after the recap. One of the things that I have that is kind of interesting, though, there are some research notes about cryonics, and obviously we will talk about cryonics in today's show. And this ties into something that I think that not a lot of people know about. There was a Gene Roddenberry project that he was trying to get off the ground in the early 80s called FutureWorks. And this would have been a science fact show, kind of along the lines, I don't know if you remember at the time, Ken, a show called That's Incredible, early 80s. So that was a very kind of sensationalized magazine show. This was to take that format but make it a little more real science. And part of the, they have this long list of topics that Gene was researching, and one of those was cryonics. So we've got some research notes that actually tied back into those research notes, and I'm going to run that because it does help to illuminate what the position of Star Trek would be in the 24th century about cryonics, how we would sort of contextualize this in the future story that we're telling here. Fewer things to hit before we get into the show. Nice shout out. I'm very impressed with the shout out for the QE2. And they actually got it right because the QE2 was not retired until, I believe, 2008. So when Data says that the QE2 was sailing in the late 20th and early 21st century, he was right. And that could have gone the other direction, and the QE2 could have been retired much earlier than she actually was. So I'm glad to see that. She was actually launched in 1967, so did quite a number of trips in those years. And let's talk about the guest stars, Ken, because we've got a lot here, and they're kind of awesome. So we got to start out with Leon Rippey.
Love Leon Rippey.
Yeah, he's just kind of awesome. I love his voice. I love his presence. He did just a ton of TV work. He's originally from South Carolina. And Ken, I know that you have some favorites of Leon Rippey that you wanted to hit.
Honestly, it's kind of goofy. His favorite for me is Earl from what was that show? Saving Grace. I loved him as Earl in Saving Grace. And for people who haven't watched it, I don't guess you need to go back and watch it. I happened to catch some episodes, and he was this angel who was nothing like an angel. And that's like what's really cool about it, I think. It's not Highway to Heaven. It's more like back alley, maybe near heaven, but not so much. So I love him. Right. I love him for that. But then, he was in Deadwood, apparently. I totally forget him in Deadwood, but I love Deadwood. Anybody who was in Deadwood automatically goes to the top of the list as far as I'm concerned. And, he's just one of those guys who's always fun to see. There's something about him that's very, I don't know. There's something about him that's very likable. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, not so likable in that, but not terrible. What else? There's The Patriot. And, how do you feel about the movie The Patriot? Whatever. He's kind of a fun character in it. It's, I like him a lot. Plus, cool. I am a huge fan of L.Q. Sonny Clemens music. So, I mean, if anybody could really bring him to the screen, I would say it would have to be Leon Rippey.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We also have Gracie Harrison as Claire Raymond. She has just a handful of mostly TV credits. And then rounding out those three, you have veteran character actor Peter Mark Richmond as Ralph Offenhouse. And the guy has just been in a huge number of projects, over 500 TV credits, including cool stuff like The Twilight Zone and The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and not so cool stuff like Galactica 1980, and even weirder stuff like he played the Pharaoh in an episode of Electra Woman and Dyna Girl from the Croft Super Show. He also did a huge amount of voice work in animated shows. So even if you don't know the face, you probably know the voice of Peter Mark Richmond.
Hey, and I'm sorry, hang on one second. I'm going through IMDb here. There's actually a little trick here that we can do with Leon Rippey.
Yeah. Okay.
That you often like to do.
Okay.
So he was in the miniseries, the TV miniseries North and South Book 2.
Featuring, of course, Jonathan Frakes.
Jonathan Frakes and Kirstie Alley.
This is like a big Star Trek family reunion.
It's like a big Star Trek love fest. Now, I have not seen North and South Book 2. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Leon Rippey played a Southerner.
That is likely. That is very likely.
It does seem kind of. Sorry to interrupt your flow.
No.
Go ahead.
That's fine. I'm going to wrap it up just by pointing out that the Romulans here, we meet two of them in this episode. We welcome back Mark Alimo, who we last saw in Lonely Among Us, and we will definitely see again. And Anthony James, who racked up a really impressive number of TV credits before largely quitting in the early 90s to become an artist. And his last credit actually is the movie Unforgiven. You recognize him. He has a really distinctive voice and kind of this long, gaunt face. I remember him well from an episode of Buck Rogers, where even behind all the makeup, you just know that it's him.
What do a financier, a homemaker, a musician, and a popsicle have in common? Let's find out.
Prologue. Captain Picard is away at a very important meeting on Starbase 718. While the Enterprise is just hanging out, waiting for him to return, the crew notice an ancient, derelict spacecraft floating nearby. Hey, want to go check it out? Riker's like, nah, it's old. What do we need with old stuff? Data is kind of thinking that it could at least be interesting since they have time to kill. Riker is still like, oh, come on, history is just about old things that aren't important anymore, so go if you want, I guess. Data and Worf beam over to the craft, which seems to be in all right shape for being hundreds of years old. When the main door is forced open, they find a room containing human-sized capsules of some sort. Inside 2 of those capsules are human remains, but in 3 of those capsules, there are actual frozen humans. Act 1. Data has an idea. Frozen people on the derelict spacecraft are in danger since that ship's systems aren't working too well. With permission, Data beams those 3 along with himself and Worf back to the Enterprise. Want to know who else is coming back to the Enterprise? Captain Picard. And he is in no mood to do anything other than look very serious and give orders. He tells Geordi to lay in a new course and step on it. Looking at the map, Geordi realizes the new coordinates will take them right into the neutral zone. Yep. Picard just came back from a briefing that Federation outposts have been destroyed, and the Romulans, who no one has heard from in decades, are most likely responsible. The Enterprise is heading out to investigate, and we may need to be ready for a fight. At least that's what Worf would have us do. Picard is more of a mind to play things cool until he knows for sure what they are up against. Now, to his surprise, Picard finds out that they have guests on board. Dr. Crusher has been successful in thawing out the 3 people recovered from the derelict craft. One of the 3, a woman, regains consciousness only long enough to faint as soon as she sees Worf. Act 2. Time to meet the guests. Claire Raymond, a homemaker, Ralph Offenhouse, a businessman, and L.Q. Sonny Clemens, a mystery. He might have had something to do with music. In any case, they all 3 died at some point in the past and had their bodies frozen. Now Dr. Crusher has cured whatever killed them and brought them back, safe and sound, on the Enterprise in the 24th century. Picard is intrigued, but he's got more important things to think about, like approaching the neutral zone, where he will find out who knows what. Riker, Data, and Dr. Crusher are now in charge of the three guests, and all of this is going to take some explaining. Sometime in the 1990s, these people died. For Claire, it was rather sudden from a pulmonary embolism, and their bodies were frozen to be, hopefully, revived later. A lot has changed. We've got starships as a federation. Data is an android, not a robot. And that guy with the weird head is a Klingon. Enough fun and games. Offenhouse, the businessman who is concerned about business, he does business, you see, and he wants to get back on the phone to talk business with other business people. Not going to happen just yet. Meanwhile, Deanna is trying to explain the sketchy details of Romulan psychology to Picard. They can be extremely violent, but they will not make the first move. They're waiting for you to strike first. Sonny Clemens is adjusting to the 24th century life. Taking a page out of the mission log playbook, first thing he does when introduced to a replicator is order up a martini. Sonny is taking a liking to Data, but Offenhouse is getting restless. He wants to see the captain. Act 3. In his ready room, Picard confers with his staff about the neutral zone. They assume that the 9 bases there have all been destroyed by Romulans. Therefore, they assume that the Romulans are at the very least looking for information on how the Federation has advanced in the decades since their last encounter. The command staff agree. They may need to be ready for a fight. As they discuss the matter, Ralph Offenhouse's voice blares over the speaker. He wants to see Picard right now. Before Offenhouse can spit out a few more complaints, Picard comes strolling into the room where the 3 20th century guests are hanging out. Offenhouse wants to talk to the law firm that he knew in the 20th century. Picard tries to set him straight, though. The world has changed. There is probably no more law firm, and the 24th century is not obsessed with money and power. Picard is going to help, though. He sends Deanna Troi, who addresses Claire. She's sad because she knows that everyone she loved from the 20th century is gone, especially her 2 boys. One way Deanna can help is to look up family history for Claire on the ship computer. It works. 10 generations of her family flash by on the screen. Down in sickbay, Sonny is trying to convince Dr. Crusher that he needs some medication to help him through the day. Purely unnecessary, the doctor says. He shuffles off to find Data. All he wants is a chance to socialize, maybe play a guitar. The party will have to wait, though. Picard calls Data as they are approaching the neutral zone. Act 4. Arriving at the neutral zone, there is a whole lot of nothing, as in the outpost they hope to find is just gone. They have no idea how it could have happened, but it doesn't seem to be from a conventional attack. In their quarters, Offenhouse is getting all worked up again. He tells the others that he's going to find out what's going on, even though Sonny tells him there's nothing he can do about it. He doesn't care. Even with the ship going to yellow alert, Offenhouse makes his way to the bridge just as things are getting tense. In the place where another outpost should be, there is again nothing. Worf and Geordi are both reading disturbances that could be a Romulan ship getting ready to decloak. But Picard does not want to assume an offensive posture. He won't arm torpedoes. He won't charge up the phasers. He knows that if there are Romulans, they will be looking for a sign that the Enterprise is ready to fight. In a moment, the Romulan ship reveals itself, a huge, green, new and improved warship, and Offenhouse can't contain himself. Act 5. Everyone is trying to take in the moment. No one expected to see the Romulans again, and curiosity is countered with Worf's rather blatant offense. They don't like humans or Klingons, and he is ready to fight them. Picard tells Worf to put a proverbial sock in it. He wants to open hailing frequencies to find out what's going on. On screen with the Romulans now, things get more interesting. The Romulans, too, have lost a handful of outposts. Offenhouse makes an outburst and calls their bluff. They have no idea either who could have cut such a wide path of destruction. But we know now that it wasn't the Federation, and it wasn't the Romulans. Picard proposes something a bit unorthodox. Wait for it. Cooperation. Or if you're from the planet Snoo, you may know it as Shirley. The Federation will share any information about this new threat with the Romulans, and the Romulans will do the same. Only they want to leave Picard with some unnecessary verbal intimidation, just to make sure the Federation knows who's boss. We get to breathe a little sigh of relief. Tension is still high, but we avoided any shooting. Deanna is still helping Claire. She's located a distant descendant living near Indianapolis. It's Claire's great-great-great-great-great-grandson, though Claire is amazed to see that he looks so much like her husband. Picard has a plan. They'll rendezvous with the USS Charleston and hand over their visitors from the past. In time, they will be taken back to Earth, where they can carve out new lives. Offenhouse may have the most trouble adapting. He doesn't know what to do in a world where material possession isn't the foremost goal. Picard encourages him to try something new. Self-improvement, self-enrichment. You may like it. With that, the Enterprise heads out into the future. Well, at least a few months into the future as we wait out the hiatus. The end.
Well done, sir.
Why, thank you.
I gotta say, I love the fact that life prolongation doesn't almost kill almost everyone in this episode. And let me say, take that, Miri. And every other life prolongation episode where everybody almost dies.
Yeah, don't mess with Mother Nature unless...
Well, yeah, go ahead. It turns out, it's fine. If you can get past the 23rd century, then life prolongation should be okay. I will say it is kind of sobering to think that one day there will be no phones, though, and no banks, and no Wall Street Journal. I am, of course, looking forward to chronicling every minute of it personally over the next 370 years or so from my robot body, along with what I assume will be your great-great-great-great-grandchild. So you need to get busy and get busy.
That's too much work, Ken.
I got plans, dude. I got plans, and I can't have you standing in my way.
All right. All right. Well, hey, when you get to the future...
Yeah. Wait. I just got there. What do you need?
Okay. Well, if there's a guy named Riker, tell him that I'm very disappointed with his lack of curiosity about ancient history.
What is up with that? So what was the planet that they went to that was like a total myth, like Magrathea, but not, with all the artists and the guy who will eventually play Mark Twain?
Altair, or the Alteans. Yeah, Altea.
Yes. So Riker is totally into this ancient myth, totally fictitious planet, right? Mm-hmm. But Earth history, nah.
No.
And so he and Data, spend a few minutes with the three people from the 20th century, and then as they're leaving, Riker's like, from what I've seen of our guests, there's not much to redeem them. Makes one wonder how we survived the 20th century. Okay, meow. You've been with them for like 3 minutes. Right, 3 minutes, and you're like, oh, look what I stepped in. My ancestors. Mm-hmm. Which, in fairness, Picard was kind of the same way. He was like, he came on board and he was like, just keep them out of my way. I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to know about it. Just keep them away from me.
Yeah, it's such a weird reaction. Like, just from the very beginning, that there's this really cool, and it's good special effects work. This is a really cool model, this really cool spacecraft.
Yeah.
And Riker's just like, just let it float on by. And if it gets destroyed, it gets destroyed. So what?
Yeah, sir, I think it'll end destroyed. And?
Yeah, it's like they're literally doing nothing. They're waiting. They're at a dead stop, and they're just waiting for Picard to come back. And here's a thing that is totally out of the ordinary that they could check out. You may learn something. Let's get back to that whole thing about self-improvement and enrichment and education.
Whatever.
You may learn something,
That's
Riker.
That's the past. They're going to the future.
Yeah.
And those who forget history are A-OK.
Right. Oh, that makes me sad. But, when they do get there, it's a good thing there are no genetically engineered supermen on board that ancient derelict craft. It's, not surprisingly, there was no mention of that possibility from Data before they beamed over or after they beamed over. There are some of the research notes comparing this to Space Seed, saying like, hey, just make sure that we're not doing a Space Seed thing over again.
Yeah.
So
we don't want Star Trek to retread that until several decades from now.
Right.
Or a couple of decades anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, and on that ship, Data does say that he's going to download that disk drive, which I thought was pretty good. It's a 20th/21st technology being used in the right context.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it on the old show when we were looking at episodes of TOS, and there would be a mention of the tape or whatever. Like, what? This is the 23rd century. You don't have tape. You don't have tape at all. But Data finds this technology that would have been a late 20th, early 21st century technology that we know is a disk drive. And what do? Well, you try to hook it up to your new computer and download that information, which I imagine doesn't go well.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the surprising part.
Yeah.
That they had a, 300-year-old data converter.
Yeah, I'm going to guess it on the Enterprise. It would be you don't have a SCSI port adapter just laying around.
Then again, though, the computer can make LQ Sonny Clemens a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So it ought to be able to make a disk drive.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
That's interesting, actually. You're never out of a tool. You're never going to have a thing like, oh, well, sorry, we couldn't convert that. Well, of course you could, because a computer could just go ahead and 3D print you one. Or, 3D replicate you one. Whichever.
Yeah.
I have a question. So Picard comes back and he's like, neutral zone business, no time for anything else. How does he seriously end up at sickbay before he finds out that there's somebody else on board?
I see what you mean. I kept feeling I kept feeling like there was a missing moment there.
Yeah. Well, there was. But I'm thinking, is Picard in his head going, wow, how many people did I pass on the way here? Who didn't feel it was important to tell me that there are 3 other life forms on my ship now? Because that's kind of a big deal for a starship captain, I would think.
It is. An interesting thing here that we finally have a date mentioned in Star Trek. So Data tells these guys that the year is 2364.
By their reckoning.
By their reckoning, yeah. So more than 100 years since the beginning of Kirk's 5-year mission. By the way, 400 years since the Beatles landed in America, just if we need to put that into context. Nice. But that's pretty interesting because then from a trivia point of view, the rest of Star Trek kind of revolves around that because we didn't have hard dates mentioned in other episodes. We had star dates, but now everything we know kind of revolves around this. So we know when Next Gen takes place. We did have Data mention that he was in the class of 78, but we might have to chalk that up as being apocrypha or a mistake because class 78 would have been, well, nearly 100 years before he's on the Enterprise.
And we know that he's only been in Starfleet for 20-something years, like 26, exactly. Right? So he graduated, but maybe he didn't finish his dissertation.
Yeah, he took some time off. He did some farming. He
had to go find himself. He went to Europe.
Yeah, he did.
What was left of Europe after what I assume was a number of wars. And Paris is still there, though. So that's because they'll always have that. I will say it's disappointing. I know I sound like I have a bit of a crush on LQ Sonny Clemens, and it's mostly it's mostly because I grew up listening to his albums. I mean, his music will always speak to my core.
Touches the heart.
Yeah, I love the fact that Data knows exactly what to do with this guy. Oh, you nearly destroyed your liver. Here's the keys to the liquor cabinet. I like that. I will say, though, he did disappoint me as a country and or blues man, and he really was good in both. LQ Sonny Clemens should not be ordering a martini. I know that speaks to you, but he is a Southerner steeped in Southern tradition. He should have ordered either a Sazerac Sling or maybe a Georgia Mint Julep, maybe. I'm assuming you would go for a Georgia Mint Julep because he wants to see how the Braves are doing.
Right.
Which which puts him in Atlanta, or at least in the southeastern portion of the U.S., but not so far south that he would care what the Tampa Devil Rays, is that what they're called? I don't know.
Sure.
My knowledge of baseball is actually pretty slim.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we do have to assume that he's drinking something that is not the alcohol that we know, because, well, you have synthahol in the future.
Yeah, he doesn't know that, though.
He doesn't know that. That's very true.
We don't even know that yet, actually.
We don't even know that. But like you said, Data basically gives him this tool to say, here you go. Here's how you get unlimited booze. And I'm thinking...
Which totally works for LQ Sonny Clemens.
Yeah, and, not even 100 years ago, Kirk was giving Khan something to read.
Yeah.
He was saying, here's the computer. You want to learn about this ship. You want to learn about history. You go right ahead. Knock yourself out.
Well, now, remember, though, in Heart of Glory, was it Heart of Glory? Is that the one with the Klingons?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In Heart of Glory, Worf pulled the total Kirk maneuver of just giving the enemy, who he didn't know it was the enemy at the time, but just giving them free run of the ship. Like, it took them every place they wanted to go, showed them everything they wanted to see. It is possible that the 1701D had like an all staff meeting about basically not giving anybody new on the ship access to anything.
Right.
Without knowing who they are or what they are,
Yeah.
Feed them, give them something to drink. Do not give them texts and specs. Do not give them a tour. Do not give them free reign, which they still get. It's so funny, the ideas that Picard labors under. I mean, they really are ripe for the mule in a way. He's like, did you give that man permission to call me? Right. It's like, of course I didn't give him permission. Okay, really? That's what's going to stop him. It was kind of an interesting idea to me. I will also say, that woman, what's her name?
Claire,
horrible person. Absolutely horrible person. She is just terrible. 370 years later, and she's all, my husband's an idiot. But at least he got one thing right. I'm glad he's dead. I mean, she's just like, terrible. She's just a horrible, horrible person. Wait a minute. In her defense, to her, it's not 370 years.
It's maybe days. I mean, literally, she got ill. She died.
That is still a horrible person. I'm sorry.
It's a horrible thing, but we don't know. Maybe they're having some marriage trouble. Maybe they're on the rocks
That's
anyway.
That's be the first thing you say to everybody.
It might have been on her mind.
Oh, dude, I will say she is lucky, though. It's kind of awesome that detailed records of everyone survived the eugenics wars, and then whatever it was that was going on when Zefram Cochrane fired up the warp drive for the first time and made first contact with the Vulcans.
Hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, it hasn't happened yet for us. It's happened already for Star Trek chronological history, but we haven't got that story.
We met Zefram Cochrane in the 60s.
We did, but we didn't know about first contact with the Vulcans.
But it's already happened.
Yeah, okay.
My point is, Earth's been through just crap storm after crap storm.
Yeah.
And yet detailed records, down to where this guy lives.
Well, again, it's like we talked about before in the show. It's Facebook, man. We don't have to rely on government records surviving for hundreds of years. Yeah. We know that everything that we do, everything we touch, everything that we eat is being stored in multiple copies and networked to everybody else. Okay, so
forgive me, because I am going to jump the timeline as far as production goes. Are you telling me Alfre Woodard and James Cromwell are stopping to tweet and Facebook their locations while they're being destroyed by the Eastern Alliance or whatever that's called, while they're being bombed?
Absolutely.
OMG, being bombed by whoever the heck that is.
Yeah, FML.
SMH.
So Ken, tiny bit more of trivia that I said I wanted to come back to.
Yeah.
So the question became, who destroyed those bases near the neutral zone? And if Maurice Hurley had been able to write the two-parter that he originally wanted to write, it would have been, I don't know, like a collective, like an insect-like, fearsome alien, maybe with like a hive mind kind of thing. And but there was no more time to develop that enemy.
These aren't those zombie ants you were talking about in last week's episode, are they?
No, but those things are creepy as hell.
Oh, they are.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I would make that my enemy if I were writing a sci-fi series today.
Yeah. Well, that alien entity that we didn't get developed for this particular episode, maybe we'll get to see it sometime down the road.
It's interesting that you say that, because my money was going to be on the crystalline entity. It's not dead yet.
No, right.
Yeah, as far as we know. And I say yet as if it's ever going to be killed.
Right.
Whoops. So one thing that I found interesting, actually, because you're talking about enemies that we didn't see, we're kind of giving the Ferengi their walking papers as the bad guys in this episode, aren't we? I mean, they're still going to be around, but they're not going to be the big bad that they had apparently been planned to be when this first started.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that is a very specific thing, though, because and I go back to the research notes on this episode. So here's the thing. I felt like the ending with the Romulans was a little hokey, though. We're back, just a little too leading.
Well, if you say it that way, it's hokey. He didn't say we're back. He said, "Rah."
Yeah, well, still. But here's the interesting thing, though, that there was resistance to the idea of this being Romulans because Gene himself had decreed that there would be no Klingon, no Romulan, no Vulcan stories in this new series.
Really?
So had we introduced a new species, it would have been more about them rather than about actually meeting the Romulans and having an interaction with them. So, yeah, part of that then just sort of got the go-ahead to say, OK, well, the Ferengi, we're sort of drawing a line now to say that the Ferengi are not necessarily the fearsome primary bad guys that we will face in this series. And we kind of got to loosen up on that restriction a little bit and reintroduce the Romulans. But in a parallel Star Trek universe, that would not have been the case.
That's the one with Harcourt Fenton Mudd at the center of this episode.
Maybe.
I got to say, there's one thing that I'm kind of disappointed. Maybe they actually should invite the Romulans to the party that LQ, Sonny Clemens, and Lieutenant Commander Data are planning. Because they talk about it. Sonny's like, why does that not make me feel good? And Data's like, I have no idea. He's like, but we're not going to invite these Romulans to the party. And Data's like, yeah, no, that wouldn't be appropriate. Hang on, because I saw Star Trek V, and I assume, Sonny Clemens didn't die or didn't get frozen until like somewhere around 94, maybe. So he would have had time to see Star Trek V as well.
Good.
And so he would know that, they invited the Klingons to come have drinks on the Enterprise, and everything was awesome until Star Trek VI. What? For a little while, it was great. I think they should have invited the Romulans to the party, and maybe we could have headed off years of war and conflict.
This edition of Mission Log is brought to you by the Sonny Clemens Big Note Guitar Songbook. From old classics like At the Bottom of a Jug to new favorites like The Shore Leave Planet Blues, you'll learn to play them all. Act now.
So a lot of people don't remember this, but late in the 24th century, after he returned to Earth, LQ Sonny Clemens recorded what is quite possibly one of the best comeback albums ever, Too Afraid to Live, Too Scared to Die, which was inspired, of course, by a conversation between Dr. Crusher and Captain Picard. I will say her assessment of the life of Sonny Clemens is a much better anti-drug PSA than the one in Symbiosis.
Yes.
Except for the part where LQ Sonny Clemens dies with enough money to have himself frozen and shot into space. Now, the wise philosopher Bill Hicks once said, if you hate drugs, if you're an anti-drug person, go home, get all of your records, tapes, and CDs, because he died in the 90s, far too early for such a brilliant comedian. If you hate drugs, go home, get all of your records, tapes, and CDs of all the music that you love, and burn them. LQ Sonny Clemens kind of had to be a flawed individual to be the great artist that he apparently was. That said, it is still a better head-shaking moral than the after-school special played out by Ensign Crusher and that woman. What was her name? Used to stand where Worf stands. On the show for a while. I can't remember. Yeah, she wasn't really that well written anyway, and that was a horribly written scene. But it's kind of an interesting. I mean, we do get a more subtle "don't do drugs" message here. Although, of course, the second he wakes up, he's like, "Hey, how do I get liquor?" Which, by the way, kids, is a drug. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, you would hope that maybe if he has that serious an addiction, that in the 21st century he can get some counseling. He can maybe control his his constant need for booze and pills. Because I thought it was more interesting. He goes back to Dr. Crusher to say, hey, look, I need something to keep me awake during the day. I need something to knock me out at night. Dr. Crusher should have said, like, haven't you ever heard of Elvis?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, because Elvis would have been long dead by the time Sonny got frozen.
Right.
Yeah, an interesting point. That here's the thing, though. There's really nothing to stop him from just drinking himself silly, because he could always just go back to the Livernator or whatever it was that Crusher put him through. Yeah, honestly, it opens up a whole new. Not since Omicron Ceti 3 have we been able to think about the possibility of drugs really having no effect on someone, despite the fact that there is ostensibly this anti-drug PSA in the middle. Yeah. But anyway, if you haven't heard Too Afraid to Live and Too Scared to Die, you really should hop into the future and download it, because it's quite possibly the best album the 24th century put out.
Wow, that's strong words, Ken. Yeah. Something that I want to mention here is that we go with the premise of these three people, LQ, Claire, and Ralph, are dead. They are most definitely dead by the time you find them. They were dead when they got frozen. One of the memos that I'm going to run in Discovered Documents is a collection of notes from Bob Justman. And he goes into this very interesting discussion. It's one of the few times that I feel like the notes in a memo really dovetail with something that we would do on Mission Log. Really say, okay, let's think about this. What are we actually trying to say here? And what does this mean in the bigger picture? Because he says this is a very tricky thing, since the Enterprise staff, the medical staff, can't do magic. And we're not doing a Frankenstein story here. So he proposes and he asks, like, is there a way to justify that these people got frozen but didn't actually die? Because death is a permanent thing. Death is death, and if you're dead, and you don't come back. And we don't want to put Dr. Crusher in the position, or anybody from this world in the position of just being able to raise the dead. Mm-hmm. So he kind of struggled with that. I thought it was interesting also in looking at the whole idea of cryonics. My understanding of cryonics is that the theory is that you do a couple of things. You start the process of cooling down the body as death is occurring. The premise being that death isn't a binary proposition. Rather, there is a process to dying in which components of the body shut down and decay, and in what order. And also people who are proponents of cryonics say that, well, we're not actually freezing the body, but rather storing it at very low temperature, because if you actually froze the body and the water in the body formed ice crystals, you destroy every cell in that body. But to me, still, what's interesting here is that, cryonics is a business built on fear and hope. There is no evidence today that dead, frozen, or extremely low temperature bodies can or will be brought back to life. And there is very strong evidence that the damage done just by attempting that is irreversible. So, Picard, even at one point in this, he says that they were already dead. What more could have happened to them? And then he says, well, but they're alive now. We're going to have to treat them as living human beings. Oh, yeah. like that's so tough, Picard. You have to treat somebody like they're a living human being.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. They can talk and they can make martinis and they can play music.
Well, they can't make martinis. They can order martinis.
They can order martinis. Right.
Yeah. And they can blather on about business that's been long done for hundreds of years.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, actually, because so addressing the idea that these guys were dead. Mm-hmm. I think I joked, actually, in the episode where Tasha Yar died, that death's just a thing that happens in the 24th century, not a thing that's permanent. It's just a thing. Yeah. You can bring people back to life. I mean, and not like in a zombie way or in a vampire way, but I mean, the assumption seems to be that medical technology is going to advance to such an extent that you can be dead for a little bit longer in the 24th century than you can today, and have that be a reversible thing. So Data bringing them back actually is perfectly sensible, because he's able to see it and go, oh, well, we could actually bring these people back to life. And that kind of raises a weird, to me, and obviously to you as well, it kind of raises a weird sort of debate, right? So, Picard seems to indicate that had they not brought them back and had Dr. Crusher not revived them, they could have treated them as dead people, even if it's obvious to the trained eye, or even the moderately trained eye, like Data would have, that they can be brought back to life.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm wondering is this actually a real debate, or is this just a debate for this episode? Because if it's a real debate, then we have to go back to symbiosis and whether the Enterprise should have saved the ship that was about to burn up in the atmosphere, because they're as good as dead at that point. They're about to die.
Yeah.
Now, or is the difference that they can actually, that they're calling for help? Because there wasn't even an automated beacon on this, piece of flotsam that's floating in space that Riker would just assume they'd blow up or let go off on its own or whatever he wants to do, right? There's not even an automated beacon there. So there is no call for help. Is that the difference at that point? Because yes, these people are dead, but only because nobody's brought them back to life, which is something they're going to be able to do, no problem. I mean, there's not even wow, you were able to bring them back to life. Crusher's like, yeah, so I unfroze the dead people.
Right, yeah, of course, because I can.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm a doctor, and that's what I do. I save life, and this technically would apparently fall under that.
Yeah. Well, take it to another extent, the Prime Directive. Well, okay, we can say that ship in Symbiosis was about to get blown up. Well, we know that is a spacefaring culture. We know that they can communicate with us. They're aware of us. We're aware of them. There are all these things going on where you can justify interaction or interference at that point. With this, though, well, not only is it an old derelict spacecraft, does not have warp drive, does not have communication abilities, or at least none that are working. And if we know that those people are 300 plus years old, we know that, well, they are not sufficiently technologically advanced. So there is a case to be made from the Prime Directive to say, leave them alone.
No, there isn't.
No?
No.
There is.
They're not a society that's going to evolve into something else. They're three people lost and alone.
Who are dead.
Yes.
They're dead. They do not have any choice in the matter of saying, come help us or leave us alone.
It's not a Prime Directive thing, though. Because
really?
you're not screwing with the society at that point. I mean, there were actually more people following Vol and feeding Vol than there are on the ship, and these people on the ship aren't. I mean, they're not. I don't think that applies.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, okay. No, it's all right. I will go with you there. I
don't mean to just shut you. I feel bad because I was just like, no, you're dumb. But I mean, I disagree with that as a Prime Directive thing. I'm actually just more horrified at the disdain with which Picard and Riker treat their forebears.
Well, that is the weird thing about it. Yeah. The whole thing is very strange that they would be so so put off by the idea of having to be bothered with people who might actually be able to teach them something. And that is one of the other things here that kind of worries me about this episode a little bit. Sonny calls out 24th century life for being kind of boring. Mm-hmm. And I really wonder again if that is the case. These three people are treated as oddities. And there's not really an attempt to connect with them other than Deanna and Claire. Deanna is like, okay, well, Deanna, this is your job. You have to be the person who can talk to somebody emotionally and get to know them. It reminded me of how no one in the 24th century so far knows what a wild party is. We learned that in The Naked Now.
Right.
And it's like, I want to see these people loosen up a little bit. We know that Riker likes to hang out in his quarters watching the hologram of the woman playing the lute. So why wouldn't he enjoy a concert by LQ Sonny Clemens?
Well, you did get that message, right? I don't remember if it was an email or a Twitter, that the two women playing the lute was actually just the first 30 seconds of something that we would never be able to watch on TV.
Right.
Did you see that message?
Yeah. Thank you, listener who wrote that.
Yeah, that does give one. I don't want to say the survival of porn into the 24th century gives one hope, but I mean it does let on that there might be a little bit more than we know or realize. I think I might disagree a tiny bit that there is acknowledgement that everybody's got something going on. In fact, I find, again, Claire, one of the most useless characters of the three. But there is acknowledgement even there. It's like, okay, she is the direct line. Okay, these are our ancestors. And the fact that they sit down and trace that line directly is kind of a neat, subtle message to the people watching. It's like, look, crappy as things are right now, you are what's going to get us here. Right? So that's kind of cool. 10 generations, and they're actually able to trace that line. I disagree that they would be able to, but whatever.
Right.
LQ Sonny Clemens can just roll with it, man. And Data's really impressed by that. And what does Sonny say? Look, man, it's a different tune, but the same dance. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I love that.
Even Offenhouse gets a tip of the hat from Picard when he's standing there on the bridge, and Riker's like, why don't the Romulans tell us what we want to know? And Offenhouse is over on the side going, because they don't know. They're trying to get you to say, because they think maybe you know, but you don't either. Yeah. And Riker says, shut up. And Picard says, no, he's right. So, I mean, there is a bit of an acknowledgement of that. It is kind of weird, though, that we tend to think that the phrase that I joked about earlier, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, or, whatever the actual wording of that phrase is. We tend to think that anybody who does that is sort of in for a world of hurt. At the very end, though, Riker says, it's too bad they're gone, because it was sort of like being visited from the past. And Picard's last line is seriously, don't eat it.
Yeah.
We're going that way. We're not going that way. We're going that way. So come on, everybody, let's go.
So frustrating. Again, if the writer's strike hadn't been going on and this had gotten another pass, maybe a line like that would have been something very different. Because, I think it's unfortunate that they are so dismissive of what could actually be helpful and interesting. I mean, Kirk has more interest in the people of the past in the voyage home.
Yeah.
And for that matter, everybody on the crew of that Enterprise has more interest in the people of the past than the people in this crew.
Yeah, although, for Kirk, it's easy. He got to hang out with Abraham Lincoln one time.
That's true. This old hat to him. Yeah.
Big old hat.
Decades ago, a story was made about people 200 plus years from now dealing with people from the mid-1990s. What does all of this crisscrossing in time have for us today? Also, will that crisscross make us jump?
Ken, we got to jump in time here by the estimate of Dr. Crusher, 370 years to compare old humanity to new humanity. And then we get to ask ourselves, in that process, does the episode hold up? Mm-hmm. So I pose it to you. Does the episode, The Neutral Zone, hold up?
I will tell you one thing that makes it hold up, and this is going to be a surprising answer based on how we ended the last segment. That way, when Riker says it's like being visited from the past, and Picard says, no, that's the wrong direction. We're going forward. We're going to the future. That actually makes this episode work for me. And it's weird because if you want to look at it as a way to live life, it is important to remember the past. But if you want to look at this as the end of season 1 of Next Gen, this is actually, I feel like this is a really good episode on a few levels. I like the fact that we're going to go ahead and dispense with the Ferengi and go ahead and meet the Romulans again. Yeah, it's a little cheesy the way they say we're back. But more than that, it has been a long time since we have mentioned the Enterprise 1701. It's been a long time since we've mentioned Kirk or anybody that we knew from the original series. It feels to me like this show has found its legs. Now, not every episode is going to be perfect from this point on, but this felt like a strong ending to the first season. This felt to me like I'm not watching this saying, yeah, but it's not this, or yeah, but I missed this part. I mean, I'm now after 24 or 25 episodes. Mm-hmm. This is now a Star Trek crew. This is not a retread of an old show. At this point, it feels like it's come into its own. And so in that respect, I feel like this episode actually does hold up quite well. Now, it's not the one you're going to sit somebody down to watch the first time. But watching it the way that we're watching it, yes, I feel like it works great. As far as the messages, I mean, there are a few. I mean, there's the whole, drugs are bad thing. There's the whole don't get hung up on stuff. But we'll probably get to the messages bit in a second. I mean, to me, in that respect, this episode holds up. What about you?
Interesting. The things that you like about this episode are different from the things that I like about this episode.
Okay.
And I feel like this is one of those shows where it's easy for a lot of people to say, no, it's not that good. It's not that strong. It's not a great episode of Star Trek, whatever. But I disagree.
It's not a great episode of Star Trek, I don't think. It's a good episode of Star Trek. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very good episode, and I think it does hold up. Now, the things that I think are problematic, I think the story with the Romulans is kind of limp. Mm-hmm. We introduced the idea, and I feel like there's a lot of anticipation. And had it been a two-parter, and had we really explored that, then it would have been like, oh, wow, the Romulans are back, without just a Romulan saying we're back.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a difference between showing and telling in that respect. And then there's also a lot of kind of moralizing about the three visitors, which is awkward at times. But I still love this episode. And maybe it's simply because of the position that you and I take in running these episodes through the mission log filter. We sit down to watch these shows and look at morals, meanings, messages, ethics, and philosophy, and we really try to find relevance to real life today in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And this one is all about that. This one is trying to draw very distinct lines between, but also to bridge the 20th century humans and the 24th century humans therein. So that's kind of cool. And the thing that I like about it is that for the audience, there's this little bit of wish fulfillment. The three guests on board are the surrogates for us. And I've talked about in previous episodes or storylines where that happens. Dr. Taylor in Star Trek IV is the surrogate for us, the audience, to experience Star Trek through her eyes. Mm-hmm. And we get to do that again with these people and go, well, what kind of person would I be if I were in that position? And what is it that is so much different and or so much better about the 24th century that maybe that is an ideal to live up to? So particularly from the mission log standpoint, what does this show do? How does it operate? I think it holds up very well. Yeah. And it's enjoyable, But like I said, there are things that I think hurt it. There are weak lines here within the story that could have been better had another round been made on that script. But as I mentioned before, they had certain things working against them.
Yeah.
But then we get to look at messages. We get to look at those morals and meanings and what did we learn and what do we take away from it? So I'll pose that to you as well, Ken.
Well, I mean, it's one of those lead by example episodes, right? You can worry yourself with money, with power, with prestige, you 20th and 21st century, micro brain idiot, stupid heads. The good news is we're going to get past all this stuff. It would be great to think that we're going to get past it in our lifetimes. I, of course, will, because I'll be inhabiting a robot body. But, it'd be great to think that we're going to get there. But if you can instill in people the belief that we are going to get there as a people, as a society at some point, then you might also instill with them the idea that they have to kind of start working towards that, as opposed to sitting around waiting for it to happen. I like Picard's speech. A lot has changed in 300 years. People are no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. We've eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions. We've grown out of our infancy. It's a great sort of, it's the kind of summation that we've heard in the past from Star Trek, but it's always neat to hear again. Could also explain actually why he doesn't want to deal with the Earthlings, because we know that Picard does not like children.
Right, and they are.
And if he sees them as mankind's infancy, then maybe he was afraid he was going to have to change LQ Sonny Clemens, which, by the way, if you've read his Roadies book, that was not out of the question. Sorry. I'm going to write the LQ Sonny Clemens Star Trek novel. Go ahead. What about you? I think there are probably other messages in there, but that was sort of the chief one to me is, we get to hammer home again you're going to get past this, or we're going to get past this. So, yay. What about you?
Yeah, I'm glad that you pulled that line, because I think from Picard that is one of those things that if you're going to put a button on Star Trek and say, what does this show mean and what is it trying to tell people who watch it in the 20th and 21st century? Well, that line is such an important part of that. It's great. So I'm glad that you quoted that. I think the messages that I pulled out here, well, you can't cheat death. Except that in this you totally can.
Absolutely.
If you're the 3 of the 5 who survived.
Yeah, as long as your pod stays active and you're lucky enough to have your loved ones choose the right cryonics company, because they say that most of the companies, it was just a crappy. Either there was fraud or it just didn't work. So yeah,
they didn't pay the power bill.
Yeah, you can cheat death if you're incredibly wealthy and incredibly lucky.
Right.
Or if you have an idiot husband.
Yeah. But let's look at that question or that same statement, but from a different angle, because I think this is the angle that the show takes in some respect. It's wrong to want to cheat death. But again, these people come out totally okay, and they will probably carry on with whatever healthful lifestyles they can, fully benefiting from 24th century medical technology. Mm-hmm. So, there's all this idea of like, well, we got over that desire. We got over that need to try to cheat death by freezing ourselves. That's so primitive. And I thought, what if Dr. Crusher's whole job in this enlightened future was just to go around to the terminally ill patients and say, hey, look, death is nothing to be afraid of, and then not treat them for any illness, disease, chronic or otherwise. Because there's something in this episode that kind of says that. I don't think they really wanted to say that, but there's something about the attitude that comes across that way.
Would have been funny if they had actually thawed them out and said, so listen, here's what happened, and I want you to understand why we're not going to let you stay alive.
Right. Because, just death is natural. Yeah. So just don't try to fight it.
What you and or your loved ones tried to do was so wrong. So look around.
Yeah.
Nine.
Well, let's see. All right. Here's another message that I picked up from this. Don't judge a book by its cover. The Enterprise crew are working from assumptions about their guests and about the Romulans in this. Now, granted, most of their assumptions come from good cause and careful research, but you never know. I feel, again, that they didn't bother to really get to know the 3 visitors from the past. And there was this sort of assumption that, they're primitive and they're terrible, although you would argue that Claire is terrible.
Oh, yeah. She's a horrible person.
Yeah, right. But in all seriousness, I think for all the platitudes in the show about who we are and what we are in the 24th century, there is, again, something at the core of this episode that expresses Star Trek's humanist values. We have finite lives. We shouldn't fear death. And it's remarkable that we're here at all. And by here, I mean the sort of brief, magnificent moment that we are conscious in the universe. There's this kind of holistic look at existence and man's place in the universe in this episode. We live, we die, we're part of the universe, and that's that. And that's pretty cool. So that if we were to look at this episode in the broader, bigger picture of philosophy of Star Trek, I think that message comes through pretty well here, too.
I'm not hearing the part, though, that makes you think that they think that life prolongation is a bad thing. I mean, we got that in Miri, and we got that, I believe, in, was it the Infinite Vulcan? Is that what they were trying to do? I can't remember if that's what the Felosians were trying to do or not. But there have been 2 or 3 times where we've had people trying to cheat death, and it ends up being bad for their entire planet or their entire race. I didn't actually see this as being problematic here, and you seem to be saying that is one of the messages of the show, and I'm not seeing where you're picking that up.
Oh, as soon as we get them out of the tubes, or as soon as we bring the tubes over to the Enterprise, the whole attitude is like, this was just some fad, and people were obsessed with trying to cheat death,
but it worked.
But It did. It absolutely worked.
Yeah.
But yeah. But so what I'm saying is if we are looking at the characters within Star Trek, we're looking at the crew of the Enterprise as being wiser, better. If we're looking at them as having, some sort of, words of wisdom to share with us puny 20th and 21st century humans, well, their attitude about what these humans did 300 years ago to save themselves is very dismissive. And it's sort of dismissive to me of the whole idea that they would try to prolong their lives and try to cheat death. Now, within the context of the show, within the plot of the show, yeah, they won. They won the lottery big time.
Right.
But the attitude of the people around them, who we are supposed to look up to in some way, is that, wow, isn't that pathetic that they would try to prolong their lives by doing this crazy thing. But to you and me, well, yeah, they did.
I would say what LQ, Sonny Clemens, and Khan Noonien Singh teach us.
Right.
We need to double down on cryonics.
Or let's say that in the future, you are something traumatic is about to happen, and you know that you could potentially save yourself by, I don't know, storing yourself in the pattern buffer of a transporter.
Yeah, now that's crazy talk.
That's crazy, but that would be, say, a form of self-preservation and life prolongation. You could be brought back at any point.
Interesting.
It'll never happen.
Interesting point that. Yeah, well, I mean, it would be great if we could explore that with maybe some, other character that we knew or were used to. Or, you're right. I'm just fanficking. which is not as dirty as it sounds. No. So that's kind of what we took from this episode. Curious what other people took from it as well. There are a number of ways that they can tell us, of course. Do you want to tell them, John, or shall I?
Go right ahead, Ken.
All right. Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. Our handle in all three places is Mission Log Pod. You can call us 323-522-5641. That number again, 323-522-5641. You can email us, missionlog@roddenberry.com. Any place that you get in touch with us, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. In addition, we got some other places we would love for you to check out online. Start with our website, missionlogpodcast.com. That wealth of discovered documents that John was talking about earlier will be posted there, as well as a bunch of other documents that we've discovered over the course of Mission Log so far and going forward. Then there are two other places you can check out online. We would love it if you did. Trekmovie.com carries Mission Log Podcast, as does Trek FM, and you'll find that at trek.fm. And you got a lot to do on the internet between now and next time we talk.
And Ken, the next time we talk, I can't believe it, Season 2 begins with The Child.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. The end of Season 1. I don't know about you, but I could use some liquid refreshment. If only the Enterprise had a bar. Silly, I know, but one can dream. End transmission.